Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It is time for Beyond the Box Score. I forgot the tagline. Advanced stats from simple people. I am Adam Azer with two guys who are wearing blue hoodies and recently got haircuts. This is very weird, but it's Jacob and Dan here. What's going on? I gotta tell you something. I shellacked Dan in a fantasy league this week. Just crushed him. Wasn't his fault. I ran into a juggernaut, but Jacob just whipped me even worse in the magazine league. And we were going to execute a trade in that league, and I was like, no, and I should have said yes. And we're going to talk about one of the guys involved, Jalen Waddle. But Jacob, how we doing, man? What's going on?
Doing great. Always good to beat Adam Azer. The price has gone up, by the way, if you do want to still talk about that trade.
It was good. He was going to give me Trey McBride for my Jalen Waddle. Oh, he was going to give me Trey McBride and Zach Charbonnet for my Jalen Waddle.
Wow.
I said no.
I needed it. My receivers are banged up.
Yeah, well, I don't know that he's going to help you very much, but hopefully we can be helpful here. We are live streaming on Twitter today. I'm going to go ahead and give that a retweet. This is our first time, so hello, Twitter. And hello to all of you watching and listening. Okay, so today on the show, we'll talk about the 49ers and the Cowboys, and we'll go through the news and notes. Thankfully, not too bad on the news and notes. We'll do the advanced metrics, and our four big topics today are Jameis Winston, Cade Otton, the Dolphins passing game, and CJ Stroud. And Dan, what's up?
What's going on, boys? Happy to be here. Love talking ball with you. Got a chance to watch Jameis Winston tape, and I have a lot of takeaways on not just Jameis, but that entire Browns offense. Nick Chubb, Cedric Tillman, Eli Moore. I'm really excited to talk about ball today. I will say this, Adam. This weekend, I had a few vindication moments. One, which we'll talk about on the show. A stat I brought up, a prediction I brought up about 3 years ago on the show, I think 2 years ago on the show, that I got destroyed for by you and Jamie, and has been proven true since. So we will go over that. Yes, it has.
No, it hasn't. Oh, my. Okay, we're going to get right
We'll go over it later. Another thing this weekend, a few people, more than a few, like 10 people sent me the shopping cart, something to do with the shopping cart theory this weekend, proving once again that I was right on the shopping cart theory. You can be determined as a good or bad person if you are willing to return that shopping cart or not. And yes, I may not be the hero that was chosen, but I am the hero that is here to arrive for those workers in the grocery stores who want those carts. And I had a scenario this weekend where I went grocery shopping, parked really far away, and was like, you know what? It feels good. It was at Walmart, and people just leave so many like carts all around that Walmart parking lot. So it felt good to return it. And I was even debating going back and returning a few more for other people.
I'm not going to lie. I had a similar experience where I parked pretty far away, and I really was close to not bringing it back.
You had me in your head.
I thought about you, and I brought it back. Okay. San Francisco 30, Dallas 24. And through the first three quarters, I think Dak Prescott had right around 0 fantasy points because he had the 2 interceptions, and he scored 17 fantasy points in the fourth quarter, and he ended up with 17 points. So he scored about 17 fantasy points. He ended up with 17.6 fantasy points. Dak Prescott has thrown 2 interceptions in 3 straight games for the first time in his career. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy, who I benched for Caleb Williams, scored 28 fantasy points thanks to a nice rushing performance. Jacob, give me your takeaways from San Francisco 30, Dallas 24.
So I just continue to be impressed by Purdy. I know it wasn't the best game passing, but I mean, given the circumstances of where they're at, figuring out their wide receiver room, I think you can excuse that. Good to see Debo out there. He ran around on 73% of the dropbacks, so pretty much his normal role. He came off here and there to get a breather, but 7 targets. And I know it was a huge game for Kittle on the tight end day, and I think that's cool and everything. But I think going forward, to me, Debo is the guy that I'm the most excited about. His splits when Ayuk are off the field are absolutely crazy. Of the two, like his per route data increases dramatically with that Ayuk, whereas Kittle's has always been more contingent on Debo. And I think that makes sense given the way that Debo, his routes where his targets come compared to Ayuk, they're more in the same vicinity as Kittle. So I don't know. Like obviously Kittle, I think does get a boost. But to me, it's like I just did rest of season rankings last week, and I had Debo at wide receiver 6, and that was the one I got the most pushback out of the top 12. And I'm curious what you guys think on that. We didn't really see it this week, and I'm curious if maybe he honestly is maybe one of the best buys in fantasy at this point.
Well, I think part of it is going to be if he's healthy moving forward, obviously, and we'll see what happens there. He's been a little bit unlucky with injury, especially in these situations where he's had Ayuk off the field. Ultimately, I think, and we'll see if we get it the week after this one, with McCaffrey back in the game, it's going to kind of alter the entire way the 49ers run that offense. And I've been saying this all year. And I think that will be a good thing for Debo, actually. It'll create more space for him. So I'm okay with this. I like this. I like the aggressiveness on Debo rest of season. This is still an offense that proved to me this week they can move the football without their options, without most of their top weapons, which is something that a lot of offenses cannot do. And a lot of people who think that Purdy's a system quarterback said that he couldn't do that without those weapons. So I believe in the offense, and I believe in the space that'll be created via McCaffrey's return.
Yeah. Debo had a 66-yard touchdown called back on a holding penalty as well. Yeah. Feels a little rich to me, wide receiver 6. I would just take a look at the wide receivers I'd rather have ahead of Debo Samuel. I'd rather have, in no particular order, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb for sure. I would still take Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of him.
Yep.
I guess
I had him ahead of St. Brown. His per route data with Ayuk off the field is better than anybody's. It's like above Tyreek Hill's even.
This year or season? Or career?
Career.
Interesting. Yeah, I
like to take Jacob if that offense.
Nico. Yeah.
What'd you say, Adam?
Take Nico Collins ahead of him.
Yeah.
Healthy Nico, yeah, if he gets back.
And Tyreek Hill. That's 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. He's at least we're 7. I don't know. It's tough. I don't know about the ADOT. They're not using him the same way. He's got a 10-yard ADOT, which is pretty high, and he's still averaging probably high for him. Still averaging 8.5 yards after the catch per reception, which is insane. All right, I see your point. I'll tell you what. Whatever he ends up being, he's going to be in he's going to be starting almost 100% of leagues next time out. So,
yeah, I don't think you have to pay that for him. I just think that's the upside. I just want to point that out. He really does have dramatic splits without Ayuk on the field. So you could go trade for him maybe.
Fair enough. On the Cowboys side of the ball, does one great quarter really for CeeDee Lamb and for Dak Prescott, and Prescott doesn't even have a good game. CeeDee Lamb has almost 40 fantasy points in PPR. Does one great quarter erase? I mean, imagine if we did this podcast after 3 quarters, what we'd be saying about CeeDee Lamb right now. Dan, how worried are you about CeeDee Lamb, if at all?
I'm worried about him as the player we draft him to be and what he was last year. I just think this Cowboys offense is in a completely different spot than it was last year. First of all, and most importantly, their run game has legitimately collapsed in and on itself. And I don't think this has to do with the running backs. A lot of people have discussed that, losing Pollard. I think mostly it has to do with the offensive line really regressing as a run blocking unit. And just generally speaking, the system with Kellen Moore, I'm sorry, not with Kellen Moore. I was thinking back to the Eagles for a second. The system with Mike McCarthy not being able to generate much in the run game throughout the tenure there. So I think that impacts the whole offense. And ultimately speaking, I think we could see more games where they don't have the garbage time points like they did in this one, which has been the savior for this team. So I think he's fine as a wide receiver moving forward. He's going to get his targets, but I don't foresee him returning to last year's numbers.
Okay. Would you take Debo Samuel or CeeDee Lamb rest of season?
I think Jacob made a strong enough case, and I believe enough in the 49ers offense that I could take Debo. I would want to look at the schedules for both players coming up, but I think I can be open to taking Debo over him.
I would take Lamb.
Yeah, I would take Lamb too. I think with Lamb, he's CeeDee Lamb, and he's going to get a ton of targets, and you just hope for better production for Dak. Got to stop throwing interceptions, just making bad decisions. I've been trying to make a buy low case on Dak Prescott, but he is just not running. He is averaging less than 5 rushing yards per game.
And here comes the take.
And it's so ridiculous. What you're about to say is laughably ridiculous. 3.4 rushing yards per game for Dak Prescott. The previous 2 seasons, he's been 15.2 and 14.2 rushing yards per game. You're going to go talk about, you know what? Go ahead. This is unbelievable. This is the worst Schneier take in the history of bad Schneier takes. Go ahead, Dan Schneier.
I'm not even going to say it now. You've shamed me into not even wanting to say it at this point, though I don't know how it could be a bad take. Years ago, I was on this podcast, and I said once he returns from this injury, the Cowboys are not going to run him on zone read in the red zone, which takes away some of his fantasy value, and he's not going to run as much. And both those things have been proven true since he had that injury.
We're talking about the previous 2 years is 15 and 14 yards per game. He's at 3.4. You're going to take a victory lap on something that wasn't true for 2 straight years, and now it's true?
How many rushing touchdowns did he have before the injury? How many rushing touchdowns has he had after the injury?
This is so okay. You might have been technically right about that. He runs, but this is much different. This is a guy like I sent you guys a stat, right? This is the 17-game pace for Brock Purdy versus Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is on pace for 4,481 yards passing. Purdy, 4,465 yards. They're almost identical in terms of passing yards. Dak Prescott is on pace for 3 more passing touchdowns, but 4 more interceptions. Dak Prescott is on pace for 58 rushing yards. Brock Purdy for 446 rushing yards.
Right. That's the point.
I know, but what I'm saying is this wasn't happening. He was a 250 rushing yard guy the previous 2 seasons. This is 58 rushing yards, 17.
The main point I made was just they wouldn't use him on zone read in the red zone, and he wouldn't get those rushing touchdowns.
Very specific.
It has carried over to him just not running at all.
This year, yeah, but not the last 2 years. So if I make a prediction now and it comes true in 3 years, do I get to?
No, but my prediction was the rushing touchdowns and not being used on zone read. It had nothing to do with rushing yards. I'm adding that on top because it's taking away even more of his value.
All right. Well,
and do you write your predictions down, or are they truly like all backlogged and stored? Like I remember what I predicted 4 years ago, and it's coming, baby. Now
this one I remember just because like Adam and I think it was Jamie just laughed at me when I was like, "Oh, he has 5 rushing touchdowns a year. They're going off on me." So all right, we'll see when he comes back if they're that contract if they're going to want to rush him in the red zone anymore. Wow, that injury.
Dan has the Steve Buscemi people to kill list. All right. Well, but that is seriously, though, for Dak Prescott. I know it's only like 1 fantasy point per game, plus maybe a touchdown here or there rushing. But if it's going to be like a glorified version of Matthew Stafford, you know, rushing the ball, that is bad. This guy needs to use his legs a little bit more. Okay. Hopefully you didn't start Rico Dowdle. Dowdle was started in like 30% of leagues, and he was out with an illness. Jake Ferguson, I know it hasn't been great, but he does have, I want to say 7 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 healthy games. 4 of his 5 healthy games, but needs more red zone targets. 3 red zone targets, 1 end zone target this year for Jake Ferguson, who's yet to catch a touchdown. Last year, he had 9 end zone targets. This year, he has 1. And that is it for that game. Tell us, Dan, about Beyond the Box Score, and Jacob, if you like, what's coming up this week, where and when can we find it?
Yeah, so Beyond the Box Score, it's what you're listening to now, but there's a second Beyond the Box Score that debuts on Fantasy Football Express, typically on Thursdays. Last week was Wednesday. I would say go back and listen to that show. It was my favorite one we did yet. We had Nate Tyson breaking down film of the rookie quarterbacks, among other players, best play callers, best schemes, worst schemes, breakouts for the second half. Some really interesting calls in there that you can find. Some that may play out rest of season, but either way, it's a fun conversation that Jacob and I love doing. It's our way of kind of getting to anything we miss on this show, essentially. And moving forward, it'll be on Thursdays. It was on the Fantasy Football Express Today podcast feed this past week. We'll see if we can continue that moving forward, but it is always on YouTube. And starting this week, we're getting the FFT guys on. So Adam will have a show. Dave, Jamie, Heath, everybody will be on moving forward.
To be clear, Adam is too busy for us.
Oh, I didn't know that Adam turned us down.
I tried.
Wow.
No, I think one of the give me one of the weeks where 6 teams are on a bye.
What is going on here? I didn't even know that Adam turned us down. I must have read through the show plans a little bit fast. So I guess everyone in FFT
is coming on.
Busy Adam will be joining us to help promote the show and help us get off the ground. But, you know, it's okay, Adam. You don't need to help. We don't need your help. It's okay.
Go to youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. And I tell you to hit the live tab, but I don't think that you're going to see them there. You just hit the videos tab and you'll see Beyond the Box Score. Go ahead, Jacob. Sorry to cut you off.
You're good. Ben Gretsch is coming on Adam's week. And this week we've got a spooky show with Dave Richard on Halloween on Thursday. I'm really excited for that.
Nice. Yeah. So by the way, I'm bringing on Matthew Berry, Mike Wright, and all your other guests to respond to you saying that last week's episode with Nate Tice was your favorite one so far.
I'll stand by it, and I like all those other people too. But when it comes to breaking down tape, nobody really gets to the Nate Tice level.
Ben has a comment in the chat. Adam's take on November 5th, 2022 was ridiculous. Yeah, I'm sure I will be talking about it next November. All right, we're going to take a break here on Fantasy Football Today. News and notes and the rest of the show after this.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
Here are your news and notes. Jordan Love has a groin injury. Drake Mays in the concussion protocol, and the Panthers did not commit to a starting quarterback for Week 9 just yet. They face the Saints. Kendry Miller, honestly, thank goodness, not a bad injury week. Kendry Miller has, I think, a groin injury. Christian Kirk out for the season with a shoulder injury, and of course, Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. left with an injury. Jacob, let's say Brian Thomas Jr. is back next week, or just whenever he's back. Do you think the absence of Christian Kirk has a big impact on him?
Yeah, I think you replace Kirk with Parker Washington, who is a player who I like. I think he's a competent player, but he's also not someone who's ever drawn targets at a high rate, and there's a clear difference there. I think the player who's impacted the most is going to be Evan Ingram, just because they have more similarity in the area where they draw the targets. But we've seen Brian Thomas become more and more involved as the first read in the offense, and I think that'll only continue with Kirk out.
Okay, and Deebo Samuel left with injured ribs. They have a bye, so I think hopefully we're okay there. And Stephon Diggs, still, I'm surprised we haven't heard anything on Stephon Diggs. We had a non-contact knee injury, so.
Oh, baby. 37 routes run for Brian Thomas. Without Christian Kirk on the field, he's got 13 targets on those routes, which is a 35% target per route run rate. That's a small sample size, but it's basically one game.
And just for context, 35% that would be among the league leaders.
Yeah, that would be insane for a player as big and fast as him and as efficient with his targets.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I prefer him to Malik Neighbors rest of season.
Wow.
Well, really?
He'll get back to me tomorrow, but because
of Josh Azudu?
Yeah, because of everything.
It's crazy how much one left tackle can change a whole offense and how
you're right. It's not every offense, but it is this one.
When you go from that, a near all pro level to near shouldn't even be starting in the league, it does make a massive difference. Yeah. And I'm just going to say it right now, and we'll see if this bears out over the next few weeks. I've got my alert on right now for this Vikings offense moving forward without Christian Darrisaw. We'll see what happens, but I've got high alert. I think everything could collapse really fast there for that Minnesota offense.
Yeah, he's out for the season, and I say it again. Every time
it's horrible in the second half.
Every time I talk about Sam Darnold, it's the same thing. He's incredible with the pocket clean. He is terrible under pressure. So it's a good call there. I mean, it's a good point to bring up for sure. And then, there are a lot of other. Okay, the Bears. The Bears lost 3 offensive linemen injury. I don't know the severity, but 3 offensive linemen. A lot of times they come back the next week. Texans lost a offensive lineman to a concussion. The Bengals left tackle, or I don't know if he's left or right tackle, Orlando Brown, knee injury, and Jacksonville, Ezra Cleveland, left guard. He left with an injury. And defensively, there are a lot of defensive injuries. I don't know if any of them are long-term or not. So we'll skip that. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So you download the BetMGM app and you sign up, and the bonus code is FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right, it's time for some advanced stats and snap shares and things of that nature. And Jacob Gibbs, the floor is yours.
So I'm running a little bit behind, unfortunately, because there are a lot of notes this week that are interesting. I just found that Mark Andrews had a higher route rate this week than he has had in any of the other weeks. So after the last game, I tweeted out that Andrews had not seen any significant role change and was basically just a touchdown-dependent guy. True Media has his route participation at 78%. And for reference, their past few route rates they've given Andrews are 56, 60%, 47%, 48%, 35%. 78% would be the highest rate of the season and basically in line with what we've seen in the past. So that is interesting. I'm going to wait and see what Fantasy Points data has to say about route participation, because they, I think, have more accurate route tracking data, and that comes out later today. So yeah, check up my Twitter as the week goes on, because that could be a significant change for Andrews. The other Baltimore note was 195 air yards for Zay Flowers, which is by far the highest of his career. Flowers only has 4 other games above 100 air yards. He has really looked like a true breakout this year, and that has been awesome to see. That really surprises me, because we hadn't seen much of him winning down the field, but also they hadn't really used him that way all that much, but they have been this year. So that's really cool. Lad McConkey, I'm so excited about this guy. I've tried to bring him up anytime that I get the opportunity, but really there haven't been a ton of opportunities because the Chargers just don't throw the ball very much. But if you just watch him, like, he is insane. The way that he moves, it feels so impossible for a defender to try to cover him because the start-stop ability is just so smooth. And yeah, it's hard to have a better day than he did in week 8. 6 targets, 6 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. One went down the 1 yard line. He's nuts. He is really, really good.
So you're talking about McConkey. Can I give you a McConkey stat? I need to get your perspective on it. He had a 78.9% route participation rate.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't play that many snaps, right? But they run the ball so much, so it doesn't really matter if he's on the field when they run the ball, right? So is a 79% route participation rate good enough to be this was just week 8. I didn't look at other weeks. Good enough to be a reliable fantasy option?
There have been some weeks where he has gotten in the wide receiver, like 2 receiver sets, and that route rate has been higher. So I think there's that's encouraging to me, because we haven't seen that even from Josh Downs and Jaden Reed in their second season. And we have seen that at times from McConkey. And even if he doesn't get that, if he stays below 80%, that's still the range that those guys I just listed are in. And so, like, if you are fine rolling with Jaden Reed, who's going to be up and down week to week, then that's basically where you're at with McConkey, except the offense doesn't throw as much. But I think he is good enough. And I think when he's out there and they are passing, he's so clearly the most likely to be targeted. He's so clearly the winner of the wide receiver group there, who's going to be creating consistent separation.
Oh, well, I got a Jaden Reed stat for you that you're not going to like.
Yeah, it's
so Jaden Reed he played 59% of the snaps. So that's his 4th game playing fewer than 60% of the snaps. 3 of those 4 games are Malik Willis games. And the other one was like a 30-point blowout or something like that. It was 34-13, so not quite 30 points. But I wonder if they're just using different personnel with Malik Willis, and Jaden Reed is not getting on the field. I don't know that it really matters. I don't want to start any of those wide receivers if Jordan Love is out.
Yeah.
But it's another case against Jaden Reed if Malik Willis is on the field.
And I'll say this about something Jacob mentioned, that the Chargers are not throwing the ball a lot. They're not throwing the ball a lot, but we are starting to get to levels of kind of like early Roman Harbaugh with the Niners with Kaepernick when they were at their peak, where they're not throwing a lot, but they're generating a ton of yards on the throws they made. I think they're averaging almost 300 yards per game over the last 2 games. Justin Herbert, such a phenomenal talent, such a phenomenal thrower of the football. And like Jacob said with McConkey, there ain't nothing wrong with the way that he moves.
Yeah.
Love that. All right, we'll keep rolling here. Cedric Tillman brought up Tillman on last week.
Jacob kept talking about the way he moves, and it just got in my head.
Tillman brought him up on last week's Beyond the Box Score, and we see him really contribute in the box score this week in a big way. He was in for a route on 40 of 43 dropbacks. Only Judy had more. 9 targets for Tillman. Only Elijah Moore had more. 12 targets for Moore, which surprised me. 159 air yards for Tillman. So super exciting there. Former round 3 pick. I think it made some sense that it took a bit of time for him to acclimate to the NFL, but he looks really good out there and seems like a perfect fit with Winston, right?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Do we wait for the Winston?
Yeah, we'll wait for topic number 1, but everyone was good, and the Ravens were not, though. But yeah,
we can talk about this now, though, because just a quick thing. Cedric Tillman was a player who I feel like a lot of fantasy football managers just kind of forgot about based on how his rookie season went. He went 1 pick in the draft, NFL draft, 74th overall after Jalen Hyatt at 73rd, who had a little bit of hype, despite honestly having wide receiver 1 Alpha X tape this year before he entered the draft. Then he played his final season at Tennessee through an injury, didn't have as good tape. But again, if you go back to the year before, his tape has the size, has the frame, moves like a wide receiver 1, makes plays above the rim, at the catch point and has awesome body control. On this film against the Ravens, I saw him separate vertically twice really well. The game-winning touchdown, he tempoed his route phenomenally well to break out for the touchdown. And then he had a deep target down the field that Jameis kind of just said F it and threw into a safety who was playing in the middle of the field, but he just threw it anyway. But if you watch the route from Tillman, he separated from the DB by like 3 or 4 yards. So he has build-up speed. He's much faster on tape than he was maybe in his 40 time. I think he's really, really good talent. He's somebody who I think you should be rushing to waiver wires to grab this week if he wasn't picked up last week.
He was not. Cedric Tillman's roster percentage is, sorry, why don't I? 21%. So, all right, Jacob, keep on going.
Yeah, I got Tillman in like dynasty leagues for pretty cheap, for like cheaper than Sterling Shepard was going in some places. And it's just like, what the heck are we doing here? Like, this is a real prospect. Trey McBride in Arizona, we saw both him and Marvin Harrison have a good day together, which is awesome. And I just want to point out that it's been kind of a frustrating year for McBride for fantasy. He doesn't have a touchdown yet. It feels like his production just hasn't matched the underlying data. The underlying data is really, really strong. Last year, I kept bringing him up because his per route production was better than any tight ends. It was better than young Travis Kelce and stuff like that, like on pace with young Travis Kelce. This year's per route data is better, drawing targets at a higher rate, producing yards at a higher rate than even last year. And that's just like really, really exciting. He looks like a legit stud. Like I love watching McBride play, man. When he gets the ball in his hands, like he just rumble tumble, like he's awesome out there. Back to the Browns, I forgot to bring up Nick Chubb, 62% snap rate, 76% running back rush share, actually led the Browns in routes run among the running backs, which surprised me. This is basically like what I envisioned as like his max role this year coming back from the injury. And it's just kind of wild that we're already seeing that in the second game.
Yeah.
The matchups haven't been good, but like as long as he's fine health-wise, like this is really encouraging to see this type of usage already.
Yeah, especially if they're going to be able to move the ball. I can't wait to talk about the Browns soon.
Yeah.
Exciting offense moving forward for fantasy, but yeah.
Another running back come back from injury, Jonathan Taylor, 82% snap rate, 63% route rate. Wow. Goodson barely played. I'm seeing him with a 3% snap rate. So that's exciting. I know Goodson was in there to have that dropped touchdown. It was a really irritating week for Anthony Richardson people. But yeah, Taylor played a ton, so that's good. Somebody who did not play a ton that it was a bit disappointing was Troy Franklin for the Broncos. He had a really good week. I thought he looked awesome last week. He had a 39% route rate this week. I'm guessing that was just because of the game script.
He dropped the target, a deep target he should have never dropped to. I think that
you
might
think he got benched or something? Yeah. Well, he
had
the same route rate as Vele. He was well behind Lil Jordan Humphrey.
I feel like Peyton doesn't love he like wants to have these field stretchers, but like he never plays Marvin Mims. He never plays Troy Franklin.
Yeah. To me, he looks like a real potential outside receiver, which is a little bit different than Mims. I don't know. Like just given the usage last week, I thought like there was potential because we never really got to see Mims do that.
True.
Another random guy here, Jalen Coker for the Panthers. 33 of 41 dropbacks he ran a route on. He ended up with 4 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown, 6 targets. On the year, he has really strong per route efficiency. He just hasn't been targeted very much. He has a 14% target per route run rate. That's up to 20% when Deontay Johnson is off the field. I think that he can work with that. So if Deontay gets traded, you're probably looking at him and Liggett and maybe Thielen if he comes back. I think he could be a real fantasy producer in like deep leagues with that kind of a role. This is a guy that was really productive in college, but is a Holy Cross and he didn't get drafted. So it's like, what do you make of that production? Maybe nothing. But then you see him actually doing it here, albeit it's on this garbage team and garbage time. But like fantasy, all that matters is stats. And he might be able to deliver that for you. He looks like somebody who can get open. He's big. He's 6'3". He's an interesting player to watch as a rookie.
Jackson Coker, just to say the name again. Jalen Coker for the Panthers. Yeah.
1% owned probably. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, kind of disappointing. No real change for him with DK Metcalf out. He had a 68% slot rate again. His average route depth, so that's the distance from the line of scrimmage that his initial cut and his route comes, was 7 yards downfield. So I went and watched the few routes that he did get a run down the field, and most of them he's just clearing space. Only 2 did he actually get an opportunity to run a route where there might have been a target. He got targeted on both of those. But he was mostly just clearing space. Running back was targeted on like 4 of those 10 routes. The offensive line is just a problem. I think it was a problem throughout this whole game, and it's been a problem all year. Ryan Grubb is somebody who would love to attack down the field, but we've only been able to see him do that a few times this season.
Yeah, but they could be getting healthier in the coming weeks because they activated a couple of players off IR. So this is the Seahawks we're talking about. But I was equally disappointed. I had that note as well that JSN had a 68.4% slot rate. I was hoping that just like last year, his highest percentage on the outside was the one game Metcalf missed. Wow, a big surprise. It was arguably his best game last year. I just don't. It's just annoying to draft a guy in the first round and turn him into a low low route depth slot guy. It's like,
I don't really think that's the kind of player he is, Like, I think he is somebody who can win versus press coverage and get open down the field, but we just really haven't seen him get much of an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Two more notes. Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir led the team in routes again, 10 targets. On the year, Shakir is the wide receiver 6 in yards per route run.
Wow.
I think it goes really overlooked because he had the injury and it's been, really run heavy and stuff like that. They traded for Amari Cooper. He probably got dropped in some leagues, and I think people have just kind of given up on this guy, forgotten about him. I think the Cooper thing only helps him, and the emergence of Keon Coleman probably helps him too. Neither of those guys are necessarily going to be huge target earners. Cooper is, not graded out well in the separation scores and stuff like that. Shakir does. I think he's the one who can consistently keep this offense on track by winning over the middle and getting yak. I think that's going to be really important for the Bills' passing game, and it seems like the Bills are maybe going to lean into the passing game a little bit more. His target per route run rate is up to 24%. That's a huge change from what we've seen in the past for Shakir. Last year was at 14%. So I think he's a legit fantasy player that you need to have in your roster and probably be starting.
Can you look something up at some point? He's caught 36 of 38 targets.
That's what he does.
There's got to be a stat out there like minimum 35 targets. This is the highest catch rate ever, right?
Yeah, he has the most consecutive catches of all time. He set that record earlier this year, from last year to this year. I don't remember how many it was in a row, but he had the highest catch rate last year of any player, and it wasn't even close. This is just what he does. He's insane.
Yeah, and by the way, this is Khalil Shakir. One of the 2 targets that he didn't catch was yesterday, and it was batted down at the line of scrimmage. So I don't know what the other one was, but he catches every single ball that comes his way. All right, what's your last note, Jacob?
We got to talk about the Bucs. We're going to get to Cade Otton in a second, but I did want to point out that the screen game was still alive and well, even without Chris Godwin. We got a screen for Cade Otton, screen for Jalen McMillan, 2 screens apiece for Bucky and Rashad White. White scored on his. It was primarily Sterling Shepard in the slot. That's what we saw last week when Godwin went down. Wasn't sure what it would look like after a week of practice, but it was mostly Shepard. Only 33% of McMillan's routes came in the slot, so they were asking him to win on the outside, and I thought he did a pretty good job, honestly. Atlanta has been a pretty easy secondary to win against this year, but yeah, McMillan had 7 targets, 95 air yards. It was his second straight game that he had a big first down on a jet sweep. I thought he created separation. Already he had a couple big downfield targets that could have been bigger plays and ended up amounting to nothing. I wouldn't be super discouraged about the result here. I think he's somebody you hold and potentially even buy. If you're in Dynasty, it might be a good buy.
We talk a lot about how some offensive schemes and play callers can really carry the tide of an offense all the way to the top and are good to lean on when you're trying to buy in fantasy football in the trade market. Liam Cohen is one of those guys we needed to start discussing in that regard. I mean, what he's done with this Bucs offense is phenomenal, especially through all the injuries. Watching that, I got a chance to watch that tape, and they looked really good on offense despite losing Evans and Godwin just 1 week earlier. So I have belief in that offense.
They did, and yeah, I meant to talk about that when we get into Cade Otton, but just to get your quick thought, they did look pretty good, but there was really nothing over the top.
Yep.
No explosive plays, really. So when you throw 50 passes, I mean, they're dinking and dunking for the most part, dinking and dunking their way down the field. Like I said, I sat Baker Mayfield in every league I had him in, which I think is 4. And, I was wrong. I regret it, but I don't know that this gives me any more confidence in him going forward. It does give me more confidence in him going forward, but it doesn't make it any easier. It's still, He's not with Godwin and Evans. I wasn't even considering sitting him. This didn't make him a must start again, in my opinion. But
I think that's fair.
It does make him a more confident start if I do have to go to what's his name? Baker Mayfield. I sat him for Caleb Williams in the league. That's why I called him Caleb.
I don't hate that, given the matchup, though. Washington defense is all of a sudden good now.
Yeah. My couple notes from me that you haven't heard are 3 things. DeAndre Hopkins only played 32% of the snaps, so don't panic there. Amari Cooper played only 50% of the snaps, But in the first 3 quarters, he basically ran the same amount of routes as Shakir and Coleman. They ran 25. Cooper ran 22. So I think he really sat more than anyone probably in the fourth quarter. I didn't look, but that just makes sense. And then Caleb Williams. Ooh, terrible game. 3 of 12. Remember, we kept talking about Caleb Williams, air yards, 10 or more air yards. Well, the previous 2 games, he was 8 of 15, 190 yards, 3 touchdowns. 20% off target rate.
Yeah, he regressed in this game for sure.
3 of 12, 66 yards, and a 50% off target rate. That was on pass attempts of 10 or more air yards. So just a bad game. He did have a few nice audibles out of bad calls. I mean, doing some things that are like not showing up in the box score, not going to help us in fantasy. But just when I want to kind of buy into Caleb Williams as a fantasy option in that whole offense, I'm kind of just held back when I watch them play. Yes, he had a bad game, had some off-target throws, but man, that Shane Waldron offense it's just unacceptable to me from what I watch at the NFL level, and stats back it up. I think that marriage is going to have to break up at some point for Caleb to reach his potential. Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams in Dynasty?
It's still Caleb for me, personally.
I'll go Jaden.
So just to be clear,
I will too.
I want to make this clear. The only reason it's Caleb for me, from a fantasy standpoint in Dynasty, is because the main question I had with Jaden Daniels, which is can he hold up at the NFL level when, no sub 200 quarterback has held up at the NFL level besides Jeff Garcia. Besides Cousins for 3 seasons, 1 season at Jeff Garcia. That has not been answered yet, and that will not really be answered. So it's just impossible to answer that. I just don't foresee it being an easy ride for him to stay healthy every year.
Who's Cousins? I've heard you say that twice now. I don't know.
Cousins. Yeah, he was sub 200 for 3 of the seasons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you know where I read that? From Nate Tice. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. I have a Lamar Jackson question from you. I have a comment in the chat about Dan that I want to read.
Oh, no.
And no, it's a good one. And we'll be right back after this on FFT.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance, but you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Here's a Lamar Jackson question for you. He scored 28.2 fantasy points against Cleveland in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. If you were facing Lamar Jackson and I told you, I will give you, he's going to score 28.2 fantasy points, or you can take what's in the box and let the game play out. Would you take, you're playing against him. Would you take the 28.2 or would you let it play out?
Yeah, I think I might take 28. I heard you say that yesterday. That you're like, I'm glad when I play Lamar and he only scores 28. That's kind of where we're at.
That's how I feel.
In passing, I might take the 28.
I would take it. And he didn't play well yesterday.
I know.
I mean, they had the drop by Bateman. You had him missing Isaiah Likely wide open. You had him missing somebody else. Zay Flowers wide open on a deep ball.
Those divisional games that are always a little trickier for Lamar. They've seen him so much.
All right, here's my other question. Do you think I have a problem? Before we started the show, which was at noon.
Yeah.
Right at noon. I had already had 2 or 3 pieces of Halloween candy.
This is like your MO, though. Once it comes to Halloween time, you buy the candy for the kids and for the house. You just go nuts on it, which I don't think is a problem, and I'll tell you why. Your self-discipline, as I know this from having played the tennis match with you this past season, this past summer when we raised money for St. Jude and raised a few $1,000s just in that match alone. So it was pretty exciting. Donate next year. Help us support our cause. Draftathon St. Jude. But when we went out for dinner after, you had just burned off thousands of calories with 2 set tennis, and you're like, I want to order the sandwich you're ordering. It looks really good, but I don't think I have the guts for it. So you ordered like a salad, or you ordered like a teriyaki bowl. That was like broccoli, chicken, grilled chicken, and brown rice or something like that.
It was white rice, grilled, chicken teriyaki, white rice, and broccoli. So good.
Don't get me started on brown rice versus white rice. I think brown rice is horrible for you. And you should do some research on that. Anyone?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But with that said, you didn't have the guts to eat like the fat man meal like I ate, which was like some ridiculous chicken cutlet, vodka, parmesan, and mozzarella.
Here's the thing, though. Like when you have little kids,
you
eat their leftover chicken nuggets, and
I think it's going to be fine, dude, because you eat healthy otherwise, so you can pound candy and go nuts on all that stuff.
Not really. I got to do better. And here was the comment I wanted to read from Jaquan, because I feel like I've been a little mean to Dan. I just honestly, I thought his Dak Prescott thing about him being right about something he said, I just thought it was It was really ridiculous, but you know what? I'm sorry. So
the rushing touchdowns have come down, so it actually was right. But go ahead.
Comment from Jaquan. Dan's Smashburger take was absolute fire, and no one is talking about it.
There we go, Jaquan. Thank you. It's rare I get positive feedback on this show, so it's nice to hear it.
Give me a 10-second summary of your Smashburger take.
I don't even remember which one he's referring to, but I think it's just that's the best way to cook a burger.
And what is that exactly? What do we do?
Oh, you never made a smash burger?
Maybe I have.
Smash burger is you throw the patty on the griddle, or I do it on like a cast iron pan, get it really hot, and then you just smash it down so it's like that thin, crispy. You get it all burger
after you smash it after you put it on the pan.
Yeah, you get it down on the pan, right? So then it's it's crispy on both sides.
And you have to flip it though.
Of course.
So why don't you smash it before?
What do you mean before?
Why don't you thin it out before? Make it like a thin.
I don't know. That's just the technique I learned, and I'm pretty sure that's the technique is. And good point by Jaquan. You want to put fried onions on it too. That's really the best way to do it.
Good point by Mr. Popinski. I go to Smashburger for my Smashburgers. That's also.
Well, everyone these days is using the Smashburger technique. So
yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Let's get to our 4 big topics. John says his topic he wanted to hear about was Jameis Winston, and Jameis Winston. So it was impressive. I think, Dan, you have a lot to say about this. So go for it.
Yeah, Jameis Winston tape. So here's the deal with this Browns offense now as we move forward. They're actually a real offense now. They can run a real offense with Jameis Winston, which it must be crazy for these players to have gone through this year where they had to play 7 weeks with Deshaun Watson when this was on the bench. But one thing I love so far about watching this offense with Jameis versus Deshaun is the difference in how defenses are going to have to play them and are forced to play them because Jameis will target the intermediate and deep halves of the field. Watching Browns tape before Jameis with Deshaun now after, there's so much more space to work with in the middle of the field. Defenses are playing their safeties off the ball, and it changes everything for this offense. They've also done a great job of going back under center. This is what Stefanski's bread and butter was before Deshaun ever came to the team. And most of their big plays in the passing game in this game were from under center play action passes from under center from Jameis Winston. I thought if you're looking for the negatives, Jameis Winston was a little bit late and a little bit off target when he was running from the shotgun, plays from the shotgun and running quick game. The quick game timing still needs work, but the intermediate shots and the deep half field, yeah, there's some off target throws from Jameis, but man, some of these anticipatory throws that he made to Eli Moore in this game were phenomenal. The ball was out off the play action in the 16 to 20 yard range, well before the wide receiver got out of his break. There was a 3rd and 4 play where Jameis called an alert, which I thought was really impressive, found Eli Moore for the first down, just to see that kind of command of the line of scrimmage from a quarterback who hasn't played much with these guys. He had a seam bender to Eli Moore. That was really fun. The 3rd and 5 play, I think after they were backed up in 1st and 20 was my favorite. He came off his pre-snap. It was a pre-snap quick game to the left, little slant flat. It wasn't there. Came off, it hit a backside dig to, I believe, Cedric Tillman. You don't see most starting quarterbacks throw backside digs or even able to understand where the backside dig is and have the timing down, let alone make the play. He made that play. Did a great job resetting the pocket in this game, I thought, as well. A little bit late again on times. That's what I have in my notes. But overall, thought he had great rapport with Eli Moore. So I'm excited about 2 players from this game, not just Cedric Tillman, but Eli Moore. Cedric Tillman maybe looked the best, but Eli Moore and Jameis Winston had a really good connection in this game. I'll shout out Adi for this. He said before this week that Eli Moore would be a top 20 player rest of season. I think that's maybe a little bit bullish at the wide receiver position in PPR, he said. But the fact of the matter is the report, while Tillman looked the best on tape, the rapport with Moore and Winston was by far the best that I saw in this game. And I think we're going to see a lot of 6-7 reception games from Moore moving forward.
Make no doubt about it. I'm ready to be hurt again.
On Elijah Moore?
No, I will always get back in on Elijah. I wanted to bring up 2.4 average time to throw, 2.4 seconds for Jameis Winston. Only Tua had a lower average time to throw. And that was with a 10-yard average depth of target. So compare that to Deshaun Watson, who had a 3.1 average time to throw, which might not sound like a big difference, but that's a huge difference, 2.4 to 3.1. You're almost asking your line to block for another full second. And his average depth of target was only 7.3 yards. So we're seeing Winston get the ball out much quicker, but also is willing to take shots down the field that Watson just wasn't. The other note is that Winston only had a 2.4% off-target rate in this game, which, again, he's throwing down the field. And so that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
That he probably only was, charted with 1 or 2 off-target throws in this game. This is another spot where I'm really excited for Fantasy Points data suite to be updated so I can go look at the catchable air yards from this game, because I know with Watson, the Browns were sitting at like 120 or 110 catchable air yards per game, which only Caleb Williams and the Bears had a lower rate. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like well over 200 with Jameis this game, which is nuts. The last game with Watson, it was 44 catchable air yards in a whole game. And it's just like, you can't do that. You can't ask your players to be out there with this. It's not a real offense.
Yeah, and you could see it. Like, you could watch it on film. When you watch this game on film, you can understand that these receivers are look more lively out there with Jameis at quarterback. Like, they trust that they have a shot when they win their routes in the intermediate range to get the football. And Jameis is like, the stat you brought up, Jacob, is amazing. Like, less time to throw than Watson, yet targeting downfield, because you know how you do that? You do that with anticipatory throws. There were multiple throws on tape that I put on my Twitter where he got the ball out before the wide receiver got out of his break, including an pattern to Eli Moore that was phenomenal. Even the deep target to Tillman that was broken up by the safety and probably shouldn't have been thrown because there was a middle of the field safety and Jameis just said, I don't care, I'm Jameis. It's good because Tillman wins his route by like 3 yards of separation with a great vertical stem. And you know, a lot of times the receiver doesn't get the ball when they win the route like that. He gets the ball. The target's there. And I think that says a lot. Like, the receivers know that they have an actual chance to make plays down the field with an actual target.
Well, must be getting a little hot in here because it's time for some cold water.
What's that?
Here we go. Just a little cold water here. First of all, on the positive side, before we get to the cold water, the Browns' offensive line is getting healthier. They did play without their left tackle, Cedric Wills. He's hopefully going to be back soon. But compared to the state of the offensive line at the beginning of the year, it is a much different unit and honestly might be a pretty damn good one at the end of the day if they can get everybody healthy. But the Ravens are one of the worst pressure teams in football. They're currently 27th in pressure rate. And at the moment in the week 8, with 2 teams left to play, they're 23rd in pressure rate. So if we get what we expect from the Steelers and the Giants tonight, they'll probably be 25th in pressure rate for the week. So that was a big factor here. He had very clean pockets, did get the ball out quickly, as you mentioned. He threw 3 dropped interceptions, including one the play before the game-winning touchdown to Cedric Tillman. And the other glass of cold water I'll pour on it is that the Ravens are one of the worst pass defenses in football. And they were missing 2 starting cornerbacks in this game, Humphrey and rookie Nate Wiggins. So I wish he had done this in a tougher matchup, or I wish he had just done something, even maybe not this good in a tougher matchup. We'd have a better way to evaluate these players. Because even if you go back to the 4th quarter of week 7, if you go watch that game, I think it was against the Bengals, and the Bengals are just nursing a lead, playing super soft coverage. What you saw last night from the 49ers, right? I mean, that's the easiest defense to throw on. So I don't think we've seen Jameis Winston against a good opponent in a normal game script here. And they get the Chargers next week, who I think are overrated defensively and lost Christian Fulton, starting cornerback for them, to an injury in week 8. I don't know if he'll be back, but they're much better, I think, than the Ravens. Then they have a bye. Then, they've got Pittsburgh twice. They've got Denver. They've got Kansas City. They have a much harder schedule. I skipped over New Orleans. That's a good matchup, but it gets harder for them. So I honestly can't sit here and tell you what to make of it. The guy, Jameis Winston, looked terrible with the Saints last year in the sporadic moments when he played, when Derek Carr would leave with injury. Looked so much better yesterday, but there are some considerations there that I think we need to factor in. Somebody asked, would you rather have a Browns wide receiver or Devontae Adams rest of season? It's got to be Adams, right? I get the appeal with Tillman.
It's got to be Adams. Adams is open a lot on tape, apparently. I didn't get a chance to see it. Just not a lot of targets.
I don't know, man. When I dig into Adams, it's like, it seems over.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean,
I don't know. I'm not there yet, but
I haven't seen a lot of him, but I've seen the stats from Jamie this past offseason, who was very low on Adams based on kind of his age and some of the drop off in efficiency over the last few years. I will say this to counter your point a little bit, Adam. Well, I think it's a great point, especially pointing to the schedule. I don't know if the interceptions matter for us from a fantasy standpoint. Jameis is going to throw interceptions. They don't really hurt us that much. It's -1.5 or -2.
They dropped 3 of them.
But I'm saying he's going to. Like, that's the Jameis experience.
He would not have thrown the Tillman touchdown.
Sure. There's going to be possessions, but you get the ball back. I'm not as worried about that. I think the key factor is just from watching the tape, and this is what happened with the Saints too. Jameis is just such a better quarterback when he's under center in a game plan like the Browns are now going to run, because Nick Chubb, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but looked phenomenal on tape. And now he did not look as explosive as he was pre-injury. I didn't like to, from an athleticism standpoint, I didn't think Chubb had that good of a game, but man, from what he is, like, he is the best processing running back in the NFL. Watching him on tape is so fun from the end zone angle, Nick Chubb. He understands so well how to set up his blockers and where to make the cuts and where to maximize yardage on every single run. And after contact, he looked good from a contact balance standpoint. He looked way back to old Chubb level. So if they continue to get that going and go back to the old Stefanski offense where they're under center a lot and Jameis can take these big 5-7 step drops off of play action and rip those intermediate hole shots like he's willing to do, like, it's going to lead to production. Like, think about the David Njoku touchdown. Did you watch that, Adam? That was a great example where, like, Jameis holds the safety with the stripe of his helmet for the entire play, looking at a 2-man route combination to his left, flips back to the right, and just throws basically a 50-50 back shoulder to Njoku. That's the type of stuff Watson was never doing, and it's so valuable to us from a fantasy standpoint.
And it's going to lead to more scoring chances for Nick Chubb, who, despite having a tough upcoming schedule, despite only having 2 targets, I think it's a really good buy low. All right, let's go to our second topic here. It's from Man versus Life. How do we rank Cade Otton moving forward?
I've got some stuff on this. Cade Otton, I went back and dug into him because the impression in my mind, I saw Ryan Heath really hyping up Cade Otton this week, which, of course, Ryan Heath nailed this. But when he did, I replied with the Arrested Development gif. Her? Did you get the joke there? Have you seen Arrested Development?
Oh, of course. Egg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Otton. He feels so bland. He's never been able to produce anything really.
Bland is another word that he calls and.
Every time I think of that, I just think of George Michael being like, she does this really cute thing where she puts the egg in the hard-boiled egg and then she squirts the mayo in it. And the whole time Jason Bateman just looking at him like in disgust.
So Cade Otton in 4 years plus a redshirt at Washington never had more than 350 receiving yards in a season. His per route data was not good. 17% target per route run rate, 1.4 yards per route run at the collegiate level. Those are career numbers. And it's been more of the same as a pro, even with Chris Godwin off the field. So he has 205 routes run without Chris Godwin. For his career, he's averaged 1.05 yards per route run on those routes. That's a pretty big sample size. This year, without Godwin on the field, he has a 22% target per route run rate, which is pretty good, but only 1.57 yards per route run. I think Baker trusts him, and he will probably be an important part of the offense, be used in the screen game. I think his target rate's going to come up, but I don't think there's a whole lot of upside. And so if you can potentially sell him based off of this game as like somebody who brings top 8 tight end upside, I don't view him the same as like Tucker Kraft, for example, who is broken out and been just kind of a waiver wire hero that you picked up. I don't think he has nearly as much upside as David Njoku. The offense is great and is going to pass a lot. So there is the potential to run into this type of a game here and there. But I think there's going to be a lot of games where he has 7 targets, 4 or 5 catches, and like 35 yards. I just don't think he's an explosive player. We've never seen that from him at any point.
Yeah, I do agree. A more encouraging look at Cade Otton, if you want to get there, is just looking at the last 2 games with Mike Evans going out pretty early 2 weeks ago, and this game without both Evans and Godwin. He's got a 22%, and it's like a 22% target share, 22.5% target per route run rate, and that ranks pretty high. And also, he has 5 explosive plays for the entire season, which is low, but 3 of them have come in the last 2 games. So if you've got, if you're getting over 20% of the targets, and Tampa Bay is going to throw 40 or more times per game, that's pretty good. He's also getting red zone and end zone targets. The Chiefs are his opponent next week. They gave up the most fantasy points to tight ends. He's got the Panthers twice more before the season ends. They give up the second most fantasy points to tight ends. So I think tight end is actually pretty hard to rank. I think when you look at Andrews, Pitts, Otton, let's start with like 3 guys that aren't hard to rank: Kelsey, Kittle, Bowers. And then like McBride is just you start him and you hope he scores eventually. But there are a lot of tight ends that are almost must start, but I don't know. I don't know if Otton's gonna be better than Pitts on a week to week basis, but that's pretty much how I value him. If I have Otton, I'm starting him and that's it. But I do agree with your sentiment that try to sell high here. You were right about Tucker Kraft, even though he keeps finding the end zone. All right. Anything else to say?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Let's go to our next topic from Joey. How do we assess the Dolphins going forward? Achane, 8 targets and a good game at the detriment of Waddle with only 4 catches. Are there brighter times ahead, or is Waddle really just a wide receiver 3? Dan, you want to start here?
I think there are brighter times ahead for this offense. It's the first game back with Tua. Obviously, it was a good matchup for passing. We expected more, a little bit more fireworks, but thought Arizona did a good job controlling the ball on offense, taking some time off the clock, not as many opportunities as I expected, and a little bit of rust there from the passing game. Not the targets we wanted to see from Waddle. I'm excited. I'm curious if Jacob has any notes on the average depth of target with Waddle. Wasn't exactly what I was hoping for in this game. But again, I don't know necessarily if he's the player we drafted him to be. But I think at this point, his value is he's a good player, in my opinion, to trade for coming off a game like this, because, some people who may have been the managers who have rostered him are probably thinking, game back. Wasn't that great, wasn't really startable, wasn't a wide receiver 2. Maybe it's time to move on, and this might be a good time to buy. So I'm still in on Waddle.
We have some breaking news real quick here.
Okay, what do we got?
Going to be 2 to 4 weeks for Brian Thomas Jr. per Jeremy Fowler.
Dang.
That really sucks.
That's ribs. Yeah. Okay, so I'll take Neighbors. Anyway, Jacob, what do you have to say about Waddle going forward? And Achane and whatnot.
Yeah, I love the usage for Achane. His receiving has been so good this year. He looks like a top 5 fantasy running back with this role. I don't have a whole lot to add on Waddle beyond what Dan put in there. I'm definitely exercising patience where I have Waddle. If you're alive at this point, you're probably not. In most of those leagues, I think he's somebody you could buy. The only thing I guess I would point out on Waddle is that he's really, really good. Let's not lose sight of who he is just because this has been a frustrating season and last week wasn't good. Since he entered the league, he's the wide receiver 8 in yards per out run, behind only Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Nika Collins, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. He's a stud. He was a stud at the collegiate level. His yard per out run rate at Alabama was higher than any receiver. His career rate was higher than any receiver who's been drafted over the past 8 years. He's insane. So I think that's an important note to bring up too, is it's not just the Mike McDaniels offense that boosts the per route efficiency. He's been doing this. He's been this guy for a long time. He's been able to win deep. He's been able to win short. I know it's frustrating, but I think it's going to get better.
Yeah, it's hard to doubt it because you've seen it 3 games now with Tua. Devon Achane, though, is he really going to get 7 targets per game with Tua Tagovailoa? That's insane. He's on pace for well over 100 catches with Tua, and that can't continue for Waddle. And the other thing, I really feel like if Jalen Waddle is going to be good, he has to start hitting on big plays.
Yeah.
It's just not happening. It did a lot in his rookie year, or not his rookie year, sorry, his second season, first year with Mike McDaniel. But he's not going to get enough targets. I really don't think. So I'm frustrated because I could have turned him into Trey McBride and Zach Charbonnet, but I didn't with Jacob. And I didn't trade Waddle because I also don't have great receivers in that league, so I need to keep him. He had a drop in this game. He would have had a respectable game if he didn't drop that ball, which, so what did he end up with? 4 for 45. He would have been 5 for 65-ish or something like that. It's not terrible, but I don't know, man. I'm surprised at how many targets Achane is getting with Tua. It's certainly affecting Jalen Waddle. All right, Caleb Skaggs wants to know the difference for CJ Stroud this year and last year, and I will sum it up, Caleb, with one stat, and that would be explosive play rate. In 2023, CJ Stroud ranked 2nd in explosive play rate, explosive plays per dropback, 11.9%. That was behind Brock Purdy. This year, he is 29th, 6.9%. And I would even ask, now that we expect Diggs to be missing time here, again, it could be a 20 ACL, we don't know, but let's say missed time. Should we even continue to roster CJ Stroud at this point, or is he droppable? He is the number 20 quarterback per game.
You got to keep rostering him because Nico Collins, when he comes back, that changes the outlook of Stroud so drastically.
He wasn't even that good with Nico Collins.
He was not even that good. I agree with that, but he was startable at that point.
Yeah.
And his outlook is still, it's still one of the most talented throwers. The issue that I've said, we've talked about this a bunch on this podcast, Jacob and Adam. I don't know if it's been on this one specifically or some of our other Beyond the Box Scores, the Thursday show, but I'd love you to one day Azer stat this, Adam, and find just numbers year 1 to year 2 with quarterbacks, because I've always been told from the film side that when defensive coordinators have about 8 to 10 games of film to work with on a quarterback, they can start to take away the concepts that they leaned on in the passing game, and it makes that job really difficult. And we've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence of quarterbacks really not being able to carry over rookie year to second year. Some have bounced back after that in years 3 and 4. Others have been lost causes that never came again. Davis Mills is a really funny example because, like, in year 1, he looked like somebody that might be somewhat exciting that they might have found, and then he's just an unplayable player from that point on when teams get film on him. So I think they're taking away a lot of the concepts that worked for Bobby Slowick last year. And it's weird too, because you would think that with Joe Mixon in the game, a better fit for their run scheme than they had last year with Singletary or Pierce, that they'd be able to generate some of those explosive play action shots that they were last year, but they're just not able to do it right now. And I feel like teams are very in tune. When I watch the Texans, I feel like teams are very in tune with what Bobby Slowick is trying to accomplish, specifically the Packers-Texans game. So I watched that one on tape. Felt like the Packers were all over the concepts the Texans were running.
Yeah, the Packers really embarrassed them. The pressure rate is up, which is pretty crazy because it was really high last year. He's being pressured even more this year. It's been an embarrassing year for the offensive line. The other thing is it makes sense, like in conjunction with the explosive plays being down, is his average depth of target is way down from 9 yards last year to 7.5. That's a pretty big change there. I will say, with Nico coming back, they've got a chance to have some real shootouts here at the end of the year. They've got Dallas in week 11. They've got Jacksonville week 13, and then they have a bye. And then they have Miami. That could be a shootout. Kansas City, if Houston shows up, that could be a shootout. I think that defense is easier to attack through the air than on the ground. And then fantasy championship is against Baltimore. That could definitely be a shootout. So there could be some fireworks in the second half for Houston if the offensive line can play better.
Yeah, and by the way, if you just heard Jacob run down that schedule, you might want to consider trading Joe Mixon for the moon, because he gets Kansas City and Baltimore in week 16 and 17. And for my money, those are the two worst matchups for running backs. And again, you're trading, he's arguably the best running back in fantasy on a per game basis. He's 21 or more fantasy points in every game that he hasn't left with an injury. Absolutely incredible. Actually 23.4 or more fantasy points in the 4 games he hasn't left with an injury. But
that's a great call. I mean, if you can get what he's producing, if you can get that back in a trade, like, you do it, because it literally can't be better. He's been top 5 running back every single week. And so if you can get that value, like, you're maxing out. It's not like it could possibly be better. He could get hurt. He could play worse in those matchups. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You gotta get the moon for him though. I think this is just my theory, not statistics based. My theory on CJ Stroud is that it's a Tank Dell issue. Like, I know I've said this before, but I'm just waiting for the report. Yeah, I'm still not all the way back from the broken leg. Or maybe it's next offseason where he says, I wasn't 100% all year. Now I finally feel healthy. And the guy's giving him nothing downfield. And he only hit on 2 deep balls to Tank Dell last year. He threw 6 of them, but this year he's only thrown 1 deep ball to Tank Dell. That's 30 or more air yards for me. He's only thrown 1 of those to Tank Dell. Almost all of his big plays have been Nico Collins, basically. So Collins will make Stroud better, but he doesn't run that much. I'm assuming Diggs is out for a while. Tank Dell does not appear to be the same player. I know it's gutsy. I wouldn't drop him, but I think it's at least worth asking. If you have a stud quarterback and CJ Stroud and you want to pick up Cedric Tillman, I think it's justifiable. And my last question for you guys would be, if someone in your league dropped CJ Stroud, would you rush to pick him up?
No, not necessarily.
Not one QB league. Yeah, it's not
with
a
these
rush.
Couple weeks. It's gonna. I think like this week, he's probably gonna be outside my top 20 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
We'll see what the implied total comes in for Houston, but it looks really gross.
Okay, that's going to do it for Beyond the Box Score. Thank you all very much. I guess I'll speak to you on a future Beyond the Box Score Thursday episode, since I have been shamed into doing one. But for now, we'll talk to you tomorrow. And a big night for me. Go Yankees.
You got a
Go
lot.
Knicks. Go Giants. I'll go 2. If we can go 2-1, that'd be great. Although one of them would have to be the Yankees.
Yeah, you care the most about that one.
All right,
You'd go 1 and you'd obviously rather go 1 and 2 with the Yankees winning than 2-1 with Giants and Knicks, I assume.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, adios, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow.